Hello and welcome to the Driven to Succeed Real Estate Podcast. I am your host, Brett LaCoy, with a very special guest that was here once already. Different building, different set. Zach Robb. How's it going, Zach?
Everything is good, man. Thanks for having me again. It's fun to do this in a little bit brighter environment. I like it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And what are we talking about today? I think
Yeah.
we're talking millennials in the marketplace.
Yeah. I mean, when you invited me to come out here, I kind of just thought of a few topics and something that I see a lot. For those of you that don't know, I'm 28 years old, so I'm still very much in this younger home buyer group, maybe in an age range where a lot of people are just starting to consider buying that first home. So there's a lot of sentiments I hear from my friends and other people in work-related situations. Just being a broker, like I talk with a lot of people, not just my age, but something that
Right.
been a hot topic for a long time. I think is when is the time to buy a house? Should I keep waiting to buy a house? Just considering all of these economic factors that keep coming and keep pushing people out of the market, and
Right.
there's a lot of stuff there. So I think maybe a helpful thing to put out there is talking about these economic factors. What do they mean? Why some of them might be happening. What strategies can we use to push back against that? And how can you still, take that first step into financial freedom, or progressing your life in general, which is acquiring real estate and preferably at a young age if possible.
Right, right. Well, and it was Dustin Owen on the Loan Officer podcast. Shout out to Dustin Owen.
Mm.
He said this, and it resonates with me. He says, "Waiting doesn't pay.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good quote.
Waiting doesn't pay." And I think he's absolutely right. And we have a lot of things going on right
Hmm.
now in this economy. We have inflation.
Hmm.
We have low inventory still, even
Right.
with rates being higher with where they're at. We have rumblings of war
Hmm.
over in Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Palestine. I mean, there's a lot of things that are uncertain out
Hmm.
there. But I guess what do we need to tell folks is, or what we need to tell folks is that this stuff has happened in the past.
Yeah,
Maybe
forever.
it's been going on for
Right.
forever. Um, when it comes to real estate and at least owning a home,
Hmm.
it is still the number one wealth generation tool.
Absolutely.
So, what are some of the biggest objections that you're getting when you're talking to, folks who are millennials when it comes to buying a house?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think within most people's spheres, even if they weren't starting to consider buying real estate, they have heard from their friends and their family that the atrocities of the real estate market right now, and
Right.
how challenging it is, whether it's interest rates or inventory or cost. There's a lot of factors that come into play, and some people dig into those factors a little bit more than others. Some people kind of just take what they hear from a person they trust, and that becomes law. So I think it's important to maybe identify some of these things and help unravel, the true reality of this real estate market and what you can do, to get past it.
Right.
Hmm.
Okay, well let me ask you, because rate is a big is a
Sure.
big is a big objection that we get all the time.
Hmm.
Rates are just too high.
Hmm.
It's not a good time to buy right now.
Sure.
Um, Let me ask you this. You're out there in the field
Hmm.
and you're seeing houses still being bought and sold day after day.
Sure.
You know, it, we've only gone to 2 months of inventory here in the Twin Cities.
Hmm.
We're up 1 month from COVID era.
Hmm.
Why isn't it at 6 months of inventory? Why don't we have more things out there for sale right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably a multifaceted question in a lot of ways, but in my opinion, no, I think a lot of people had this idea that as rates went up, the market was going to get easier. But I think you see people in this conundrum now that have maybe purchased when rates were 2 to 3%. Um,
Sure.
and we depend on like a constant cycling of real estate because I think the demand outweighs the level of creation of real estate. I mean, since like 2008, and we've seen a massive slowing and reduction of new construction happening
Yes.
in houses. And so you have people that are stuck in these situations where they got like myself with a couple of my properties, I have a couple sub 3% mortgages right now, and
which is fantastic.
it's great. I mean, you want to hang on to that forever, right? But these people become a lot less inclined to sell. Even if the value of their home is high, it almost becomes a wash if you have to pay a huge premium at inflated prices to get something else. Not to mention the difference between a 3% and 8% rate is hundreds of dollars a month, right?
Hundreds of dollars
It's,
a month.
it's enough to push someone $150,000 down in budget, when you think
Mhm.
about it that way. So I think you have, still a slower level of new construction popping up and new development coming up, and then you just have people that are not quite ready to make that jump because they they hear about all these difficulties in the real estate market, how hard it is to buy a house, and it's like, well, you have one right now. It might not be ideal, but at the payment that you have and the rate that you have, maybe you make it work instead of throwing your family through a whirlwind and ending up with a much higher payment and what would be probably less of a house right now.
It might be less of a house. Um, so that's for folks that already have a home,
Sure.
right? But then we have first-time home buyers,
Mhm.
right? A lot of our millennials, we're both millennials,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
we're
think
both
so. Yeah.
millennials. Yeah, yeah. I think I'm on the front end, and you might be on the back end.
Sure.
Um, but I know what a lot of them are saying is like, oh, things are just too expensive right now.
Right. Yeah. I think that we have been hearing that for years now, right? Like ever since the COVID pandemic came up, which ironically, when that started, I was like, oh man, I'm going to be strapped for business. And it turned out to be one of the most busiest times in
Oh,
my career, which has not been that long. I've been doing this for 6 years now. So,
sure.
Um, yeah, so that was surprising. And it's like, how long are you going to continue to kick this can down the road with the excuse of like, it's not the right time to buy, right? We see a lot
Right.
of these types of sentiments in the stock market and why people do not do well in investing in stocks or cryptocurrency or things like that. Emotional sentiments that you haven't really totally thought through. There's some basis for reality, right? I'm not saying that people are out of their minds. The cost and difficulty is higher than ever, but
Some people have very good reasons. I mean, everybody is an individual at the end of the day,
right, right.
right? Maybe they're going to be having a kid or something like
Mhm.
that, or they're going to be having to take care of mom and dad, and
Yeah,
taking on something else like this just isn't in the cards right now.
for sure.
That's completely valid,
Yeah.
right? I think what you talked about though, talking about the emotion that goes behind. I mean, let's talk a little bit about what's been going on with renting versus owning and things like that since 2000.
Mhm.
20% of your income went to rent.
Mm.
Now it's 30%
Sure.
in 2023.
Mhm.
That's a big jump. We know that that's only going to continue to go higher. That is what the trend line is
Mhm.
saying.
Right.
That is all that. So we have to look at that and we have to be cognizant of it.
Mhm.
The other thing that we need to take a look at is a dollar back in 2000 versus a dollar now is not worth the same amount.
Right.
A dollar back in 2000 is almost worth $2 of today's money.
Mhm. It's a shocking statistic.
That's a shocking statistic. And
Yeah.
for folks at home, it's easy to think about it this way. And we're even going to talk about let's take it back even just 3 years because we've had all this hyperinflation
Sure.
and all that. If we take a look at it, back in 2020 to 2023, between now and then, a dollar in 2020 is now worth $1.19 today.
Mm.
So if you have $30,000 sitting in a bank account in 2020 and it's still sitting in an
Mhm.
account in 2023, you have effectively lost 20% of the value of your money just sitting in a bank.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, this is something that could be and should be actually emotionally charging to people because, you've always been told to save, you've always been told to have all this stuff on standby.
Right.
Let's talk about what would happen if you took that $30,000 and put it into a house.
Mhm.
10% down,
Right.
$300,000 house. Okay. So $30,000 on average here in the Twin Cities, your home value is going to appreciate by 5.4%, right?
Mhm.
And that's here in the Twin Cities. It could be different in other areas,
Sure.
but just overall. With putting down 10% on a $300,000 house
Mm.
in 1 year at 5.4% appreciation,
Mhm.
that house is worth $316,000.
Mhm.
you've just earned half the money back from your down payment.
Right.
The next year, you've earned back all of your down payment.
Sure.
The next year, you've covered all your closing costs.
Hmm.
And now from there on, everything is gravy.
Right.
Whereas if you took $30,000 and put it in the stock market, let's say at 8%,
Mhm.
that's not going to get you near the amount of return as it would with real estate. And that's a beautiful thing about real estate
Mhm.
is that even though we have inflation right now, this is a really good hedge against that. Your dollar is keeping its value.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it brings up the point of financial literacy, right? I mean, there's
Right.
these things are just not being broken down in a way that makes sense to most people, and you can't blame people for not having this info because
No,
where do you get it taught? I mean, it's something that most of us who, have started doing some investing at a young age, it took a lot of like researching ourselves to figure out these truths,
absolutely.
and something that's like my $1,500 mortgage payment is more expensive than my $1,200 rent payment. So what's a better deal? It's like, well, you're not factoring in the appreciation. You're not factoring in a lot of different things, the items namely that you just brought up there. So it really becomes just, to me, I feel like there's some missing links, for people that if it was explained in a way to them that made sense, to them, especially in this market, that it would totally flip the reality for them upside down.
Right.
So how do we target that? I mean, I think there is definitely a movement of, investing in real estate becoming more popular, whether it's on social media and whatnot. But I mean, there has to be, I think, in general, more resources for quality vetted information on these topics that are very simplified. And, it should almost be pushed on people a little bit more than it is.
Right.
You can't count on everybody to come to like the neighborhood workshop, to learn about this stuff, right?
Well, and I think you're absolutely correct. Now, let me ask you this, and it's just an opinion.
Mhm.
How young? Because you said, being a young investor, finding this stuff all out on my own. What is a good age to start learning about? Oh, it's not that things are so expensive.
Sure.
It's that your dollar just doesn't go as far as it used to.
Yeah, I mean, as far as what age, I think that you can capitalize on certain elements of financial literacy very early on into the teenage
Mhm.
years, but it should absolutely be, part of the curriculum of a high school student for sure.
Oh my
Because
God.
when do you have the opportunity to buy a house? It's right when you're out of high school, and how many people do that? I mean, I don't know the statistic. Less than 5%.
Oh, it's
That might
very
be
low.
very generous. So we just, again, just don't have those resources, and we're taught, and teach their own, right? But we're taught to move into that college degree, which kind of hamstrings people a little bit more. I'm not saying that we don't need that, and especially in certain career paths, it is an absolute necessity. But we're I think we're misdirected in some of the more basic aspects of living, right? Some things that are important is
Right.
how to buy your house, how to buy real estate, how to house your family, how to budget, how to, do all of these little financial things that aren't difficult concepts necessarily to understand, but have so much weight in the long term. And then you have, okay, college is the focus until you're 22 minimum, right? And
Right.
maybe beyond that. So then you start learning at that age, and again, it kind of just reinforces this whole, especially for young people, it reinforces this idea that, owning real estate is just out of reach for you, because you look at your debt, right? Or maybe you talk to a lender like yourself. Okay, I'm done with college. I'm ready to take the first steps of buying a home. Okay, well, your DTI is 100% right now. you, you,
Right.
you know and so there's more to unpack on that about the, I guess, irresponsible and embarrassing costs of, college education in our country, but
Oh
that's not
God, don't
maybe.
get me started.
Yeah,
Oh, get me started on that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Feel
it's
free to weigh in.
oh my God. What they did is, in my opinion, one of the most evil things that you could
Hmm.
do to your citizens.
Yeah.
Um, so we pretty much said school is too expensive. Not everybody can afford it. So we're going to give you these loans.
Hmm.
The only way, and people who are signing up for these loans right now or didn't know it when they were signing up, myself included, because I'm 18 years old
Because you weren't financially literate.
and I was not financially literate. I
Right.
have to go to college for that stuff. No, you actually don't.
Yeah.
But I cannot default on that.
Right. They will garnish your wages.
They will garnish your wages until the day you die.
Yeah. Yeah. It is the biggest shackle as far as debt goes that we have
Yeah,
in our
yeah,
society.
you cannot get rid of it. There are some like forgiveness programs
Sure.
out there. Do they happen all the time? No,
Yeah, I
not at
mean,
all.
we've been being told this tale for a long time.
With
I just
this,
wouldn't count on it happening. I mean, just like I wouldn't count on economic factors just changing in your favor as being your opportune time to enter into the real estate market. I mean, just don't count on these things.
waiting doesn't pay, Zach.
Right, right. I mean, and another quote to bounce off that, I can't even remember. I heard it on Bigger Pockets, but the best time for you to invest in real estate was yesterday, actually. It's not even
Yeah,
today, it was yesterday,
yeah,
regardless of all of these economic factors. And so it becomes less a matter of, how can I plan for the future and wait and strike while the iron's hot when that time comes, or catch
right.
the falling knife, or whatever. There's a lot of phrases that we could use to capture this. It's how can I adapt to what's happening right now? What factors am I in control of in my life, personally, financially? How can I take accountability and kind of push back against some of these things? Because there is a way. There is a way.
Absolutely.
And as with anything in life, when you have this mentality that the odds are stacked against you and everything is out of your control, it's gonna prevent you from accomplishing most things if that's your mentality.
And I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say, if you're told that you're a victim,
Hmm.
that is the way you're going to think.
Of course.
And guess what, guys? What we are trying to tell you right now is that you're not. You can do this.
Right.
You can do this. You need to have a plan. You need to talk to myself or
Mhm.
Zach, and you need to sit down. Zach, if
Yeah.
someone came to you and said, "Look, man, I really want to buy a house. I don't even know where to start."
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a pretty clear process. It changes based on everyone's situation. Everybody does have a different starting point here, but I mean, the first things that you need to do is learn how to evaluate your own finances, and typically, that comes with the assistance of. In the nature of acquiring real estate, I always tell people, "Hey, talk to Brett or talk to this lender, and they will help break down for you if now is not a feasible time for you to get a
Right,
mortgage or purchase a home. What steps can you take to get there? What things need to change? Do you have to
right.
pay off this student loan debt? Do you have to pay off these credit cards? Should you not have bought that vehicle that has a $750
Oh
a month payment?"
my God.
Things like that. So at least, I mean, we can start by getting the framework right down to move forward. And I think it's tough for a lot of people to make intentional plans like this in their life surrounding their
Mhm.
finances and their future, but it takes trying. I think we're more distracted than ever as a society, especially my generation. But it starts one step at a time. I mean, it's not as
One step
complicated
at
as
a
you
time.
think. Get a clear picture of what needs to happen, and then focus each day on how can I take out option number one, or the most realistic checkbox on that list.
For
What can I do today?
for me, what I would tell people, look, if you have to do something, start out with spending 1 hour with your phone in the other room.
Right. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Don't look at it, don't go on social,
Mhm.
don't be YouTubing,
Mhm.
just you're gonna have to come up with a plan,
Yeah.
and you're gonna have to come up with a goal, and you're gonna have to remove distractions. Phones are the number I would say that phones are probably the number one distraction here in this country, especially for the younger
Oh yeah,
generations.
and in the whole world, like in any developed society, I think. I mean, I think we're so used to it, and this is not like breaking news to anybody, but
No,
most people are probably spending 3 to 5 hours a day on their phone, and
absolutely.
I would say 80% of that is mindless doom scrolling or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
There are resources out there. If you spent 3 to 5 hours a day on your phone, researching things like we're talking about and finding how to take that next step in life, I
That's
mean,
a little different.
then it could be a valuable asset to you, but I don't think that's what people are doing. I think amongst everything we're talking about, there's a lot of societal pressures and a lot of like impending doom that we're all hearing about so much.
Yes.
And it just makes me realize I read this really good book called "Amusing Ourselves to Death" by Neil Postman. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but he does a really good job of kind of encapsulating this concept that humans were not meant to be knowing what is happening in every part of the world at all hours of the day.
How can you even process that? As
Yeah.
like your brain can't process that.
Mm-mm.
Um, I was watching something, doom scrolling.
Mhm.
So, and that's the other thing to, here too, folks, is we're not here throwing stones because we're just as guilty
Oh,
of it
for
as
sure.
anybody.
It's bad.
But it's something that, if you know you have a problem, you can work on it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
But what I was reading was like with TikTok,
Hmm.
the beginning of all the scrolling, right?
Yeah,
It was a gigantic experiment. It was a psyop.
for sure.
see, okay, well, how can we demotivate a populace?
Yeah. I mean, look at the different. I've heard this before. Of course, we have to take everything with a grain of salt, but it
Yes.
seems to make absolute sense. You talk about like the CCP or like the Chinese people's version of TikTok is much different than what we see in America.
It,
Whereas is China's TikTok is focused on athletic and academic achievements and really bolstering some of the integral parts of society and pointing out or highlighting exceptional people. We have I don't even want to go into what we've started procuring
uh,
on TikTok. Some of the stuff I don't have TikTok, I never have. That's where I draw the line.
yep.
But I see some of what comes off of there, and I see it too on Instagram. It's no different. You know what I mean? It's
Oh,
maybe a little bit
absolutely.
different platform, but I get the same content, and it is
Well,
problematic,
well, it's
to
a
say the least.
it is problematic, and I mean, when you take a look at like Meta and Facebook Reels and Instagram and all that stuff, I mean, they built that to compete with TikTok
For sure.
because why would I go to Facebook if I can be entertained
Yeah.
on TikTok? I mean, it's market share,
Yeah.
you
The
know.
ultimate 10-second fix.
Yeah.
The constant changing context, which, by the way, derails our brain's ability to focus attention
Oh,
substantially. There's tons of clinical
substantially.
data on how this whole like 8-second fix of information or stimulus that's constantly changing context. It's so disruptive to the natural process of focusing for a human being. So
So yes. So we went down a little bit of a rabbit
for
hole there,
sure,
but that's okay.
yeah,
I guess the big thing that we're trying to say here. Well, actually, before we get into that, before we say the big thing is that you can buy a home.
yeah,
Let's talk about some of the mistakes that people are making right now.
sure,
I'm going to tell you something that might blow your mind. It's known in the LO circles, but
okay,
maybe not as much in the real
sure.
estate. Did you know that cash out refinances right now
Mm,
make up for a third of all transactions in loans originated right now?
right now, what is the date range for this statistic? Is it like this year?
Yeah, like this year they've started becoming popular.
Man, so what does it say about people's general economic conditions when they're refining, pulling cash out, and interest rates of 7 and 8%?
Exactly. And this is the big thing, and this is something that you need to hear as consumers in America. Stop spending frivolously.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
you're telling me that you can go from a 3% interest rate
Mhm.
to an 8% interest rate pulling cash out of your house
Oh man,
to pay off your credit cards, your car loans
yeah,
that are at 25% interest, credit cards are
Mhm.
20
Yeah, yeah,
25% interest, then we are right now we're trying to keep that same standard of living that we had when we had the money to spend.
Mhm. Yeah,
But now we're putting it on a credit card.
yeah. Man, it is. I mean, it goes back to this is kind of like a 50-50 type of thing for me. We have to understand the problem, I think, and why it happens, and it circles back to the financial literacy and lack of preparedness and lack of understanding of what the term of student loans or the actual interest rate on a credit card or things like this, what they
Yeah.
mean. What do they actually mean, right? We're not like equipped with this information. However, I am never one to remove someone's personal accountability from the equation, right? We all have a lot of resources around
Absolutely.
us. We're misdirected, but that doesn't mean that we can't find the true reality of these things if we look for it. Find a mentor, find somebody in your life who has done well, somebody who owns real estate, somebody who owns a business, somebody who has a executive position at a respectable firm, things like that, and learn from these people. And I think most of them would tell you the same things that we're talking about here as far as
Absolutely.
spending and carrying debt. The debt that you should be carrying is something that appreciates, right? An asset.
Yes.
Not necessarily a car. I'm guilty of that one. I have a high car payment, which has been a conversation with loan officers in the past when evaluating my DTI personally. But I mean, the resources are out there. So I think again, going back to the victim mentality thing, I don't think that it's fair to be like, well, we didn't have the resources or we didn't have the direction, so therefore we could not execute and it was impossible. It's like, no, it's things are challenging in life. And I think
Right.
we live in a society where things are cushier than ever. And so we
Oh
don't
my
have
goodness.
to struggle. And when you don't have to struggle to get something, then you're not trying as hard.
Right.
I'd had this conversation with my partner the other day just about like people and it's easy to lose track of the hustle once you have like a nice like nest egg or whatever you want to call it. Once you
Mhm.
have a little bit of bread in the bank, then all of a sudden it's like you're not grinding as hard. And so societally we've just created this safe space, so to speak, where people aren't forced to think for themselves or try and use what is truly within reach for them, as far as
Yes.
resources, and tackle some of these issues. And yes, it's harder than ever to focus and to get legitimate information, but it's out there. It's
Yes.
out there, and I guarantee everybody has at least one person in their life that they can think of that would be able to give them some
Right.
good info.
Right. So what I want you to do, if you're somebody who's struggling, I want you to think about all the people that you know in your life. I don't care if they're your boss, I don't care if they're a family member or whoever. If you say to them, "Hey, can I take you out for coffee
Mm,
just to get some knowledge from you?"
yeah,
A lot of those people are going to say yes, and that's
they'll
going to be
respect that too.
they're going to
They'll be
respect
like,
the
I
hell out
remember
of
when
it.
I did that, because what did they
Yep.
do to get to that position? Did the same
Yes.
thing. They identified the people who were doing it right and followed after that. So
It could
absolutely.
it could be the most influential $10 you ever spend
Yeah.
by doing
No
that.
doubt. I mean, I've had even, and not that I'm some like big, crazy successful guy, but I think some of my peers have realized that I've made some good decisions compared to others in my age range.
Absolutely.
And I've absolutely had friends reach out to me and be like, "Hey, this is my prop. Like, I want to know how to take this to the next level. I want to get out of this paycheck to paycheck situation that I'm in." And
Right.
whenever I see that, I really want to reward that behavior, because I had to do the same thing, right? I had to seek and find some good resources, and I found, thankfully, a great mentor who has really brought me into this business in a
Mhm.
big way. But when somebody asked me that question, I'm like, and if you mean anything to me, I'm going all out to try and help you get out of this situation.
Absolutely.
And so far I can think of one person. I guess I shouldn't mention his name on the podcast, but a couple of years ago he reached out to me, very, just a really difficult family situation. And he had this house that was inherited from his grandfather. Didn't A bunch of people's names on this house, all of his brothers, and none of them got along. And so he reached out to me, and I was just like so thankful that I'm glad that you did something, instead of just like sticking at the
Oh,
situation that
right.
was like kind of miserable for you. And since then, it took a long time. And this isn't maybe necessarily what I focus on in my career. He was a friend of mine, right?
Mhm.
But in a sense, I do. I want to help everybody, and I would give the same attention to everybody. But it's like after
Absolutely.
a year of kind of walking through the motions and giving him some advice, and he's a smart guy on his own. He's very
Mhm.
motivated on his own as well. But he was able to totally flip his situation upside down. Get his house refinanced, pull cash out, better position than he's ever been in life.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying this was because of me, but it's like all it takes is an example.
But it
Yeah,
is an example.
reaching out to me was the catalyst. And it's like I happen to have had a mentor, and someone who taught me some of these lessons, and not just from him, but all aspects of my life, my own personal digging and things like that. It's like, great, this is an opportunity to share that with you now. And it was just not that much information, just kind of a little bit of hand holding
Yeah.
and sharing my experiences, and it totally changed things for him, and he has a very different outlook on life. So if we can replicate that in our communities as much as possible, if you do that for just one person, yeah,
Oh,
that changes their life, right?
well, and not only that, because I know there's probably some naysayers out there saying they would never they would never want to do that for me.
Right.
And I'm going to tell you, no, it actually is in their best interest to do that,
Yeah.
because the more people that are successful around you,
Yeah.
the more successful you will become.
Right. And
And
it's relatable for them
yeah.
when they see someone that's like has you can tell when somebody has it in them, right? The
Mhm.
motivation, that hunger to like be better. When I see that in someone, I like remember myself at that age, which again I have a long way to go still, but I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm here to help you. If you're willing to try and listen to what I have to say, then absolutely it's worth my time to give you some
Right.
tips.
But I think you just hit on something too.
Hmm.
You got to put in the work.
Absolutely.
If somebody comes to me and says, "Well, credit is a big thing,"
Yeah.
right? Credit is hard. If we're going to be checking in and you haven't done anything that
Mhm.
I said for you to do,
Right. Some
I
people just want to complain.
some
Yeah.
people just want to complain.
Right. Right. And that's
Don't
not
do
going to
that.
get you anywhere. It's not going to get you anywhere.
No.
As
No.
sad as you think your situation is, there's a million people out there that have it worse. So you may as well, again, take accountability. There's a great book by Jocko Willink out there called Extreme Ownership
Oh, fantastic
that
book.
really changed my outlook on a lot of things. He's a Navy SEAL, for those of you that don't know, and
Mm.
an accomplished and decorated one at that. He has a podcast of his own. He's an author. He's a business mentor for a lot of people, and a lot of entities that are struggling, with their own leadership positions. as hard as it is, as hard as the truth is, I mean, what he preaches in that book is kind of relating like a military mentality of taking ownership of the situation on the battlefield, or similar in a drill or with your squadron or things like that. Taking that example of extreme ownership of every aspect of your life. Of course, there are things that you can't control. There's way less than you think, though.
Yes.
Most of it is controllable, and especially your attitude, which dictates
90% of it.
90% of it. So you'd be surprised if you really start just saying, what could I have done personally in this situation? Even though there's a bunch of people that drop the ball, perceptively speaking, right? That's how I look at it. A bunch of people drop the ball. I still could have done something different to have affected this outcome. And if you always have that mentality, even if it drives you into a wall at the end, right, where you determine, man, there wasn't a whole lot different I could have done. At least you tried, you did the exercise, and
You
I guarantee you find one thing.
Oh, you
You
learned
know?
something.
Yeah, for
You
sure.
learned something,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. So again, that just goes back to all these market conditions we're talking about.
Yeah.
I think that we have it tough, but we like to talk about how tough we have it as a generation. We do, and we like to fixate on that, and it's really just not
It's
productive.
not health not only is it not productive, it's not healthy.
Right.
It's not healthy.
So, I mean, with that being said, I pulled up some basic statistics around this topic that I was
Sure.
interested in from bankrate.com, which they kind of furnish a lot of other financial outlets with just kind of surveys. They conduct surveys on first-time home buyers and things like that. So I wanted to see, what are some of the big hangups that people are saying. This survey was conducted in June this year. What are the biggest hangups when Gen Z millennial people are interviewed and surveyed on the biggest challenges or obstacles that are preventing them from buying the home? And they could select multiple options in this survey. But the top reasons were, I don't have enough income, just not ready yet, home prices are too high. So 45% of people said they just don't have enough income. That was the leading reason.
Okay.
I don't have enough income. So what can we, again, taking extreme ownership of that situation? You brought up the most important one. Don't spend frivolously.
Yeah.
Find a mentor who can teach you the real ramifications of that credit card interest rate, of that student loan, of that car payment, of all of these things. I mean, you can take a lot of this into your control.
Absolutely. One of my favorite stories that I was just watching, his name is, I think it's, I can't remember his name, but anyways, he's a guy in the construction business, and
Mm,
he's gotten really big now.
sure.
How he started out, '08 happens.
Mm,
There are not a lot of homes being built in '08 anymore
right,
because it just
exactly.
crashed, right? And he's like, I need to be able to make a living. He stopped at the same construction site 5 times
Hmm.
until finally the gatekeeper said, okay, the manager, he'll talk with you. Manager comes in and he's like, you're the guy that's been wasting my time or trying to waste my time 5 times coming
Hmm.
in here and ask for a job. He said, I love it. And he got a
Yeah,
job. And that's how he started out.
yeah, cool.
You're going to get a lot of no's because there are a lot of people out there who are very qualified to do a job.
Right.
You got to keep pushing,
Hmm.
get what you're worth,
Right.
find a side hustle. When it comes to your debt to income ratio,
Right.
when it comes to your income, it's important to have low debt,
Right.
especially with interest rates being as high as they are right now. Don't go buy that fancy car right now. They're overpriced.
Hmm.
I take a look at it, I just had one come in and that car payment is $850 a month.
Hmm. Yeah.
Imagine what you could be spending that money on.
Right.
They have $36,000 left on their loan.
Yeah.
805 or $850 a month for a $36,000 loan.
Ooh. Jeez.
Yeah, and guess what? Credit's not horrible.
Right.
Right now is, people talk about, well, right now is a really bad time to buy a house. Right now is a really bad time to buy a car.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly, man.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, you think about what you could get. I mean, right now on Facebook Marketplace, you can go out and you can buy something that will get you by.
Hmm.
It does not have to be immaculate.
Yes.
It's something that can get you by.
This is important because I was thinking about this as I was kind of putting together my notes last night. Just talking about taking these maybe less than ideal right now, or not exactly what your friends are doing on Instagram, making some of those decisions, maybe buying the not as cool house or the not as cool car or like the not as cool clothes or these things. This is all temporary, right? And the point that I wanted to make that I have told people a lot of times, especially with real estate investing, is this is a compounding snowball effect that happens way more quickly than you think it would after you get started,
Yeah.
right? So like that, driving that crappy car around until you get your first house, that's like your foot in the door. This is
Hmm.
all temporary. And so maybe even you aren't buying the house in the best neighborhood, but it's still the asset that is your foot in the door to creating wealth for yourself.
Yes.
And there's been a ton of stories, people that are invited in as guests on Bigger Pockets. For example, a lot of these guys are like, yeah, I was working my W-2 job. I did my first flip. It went really well. We thought through it carefully. I had my partner, my spouse is a partner, maybe even it's just a small
Hmm.
operation. And then all of a sudden, 4 years later, they have 40 doors. You know what
Right.
I mean? Like this happens a lot. And I've kind of, again, I'm still entering into the investment space, but I mean, in the matter of 5 years, I got my first two houses were in the first year in 2018. So I bought
Hmm.
my duplex, which is the way most people will tell you they started, an owner
Yeah.
occupied duplex in North Minneapolis. A lot of people would consider that a less desirable area. It was cheaper, and I got a fully remodeled duplex that was turnkey, ready to go. Started getting some rental income there. 6 months later, before I quit my job at BMW, which was my W-2 income, I got my license at this point. Wasn't just getting my feet wet as far as real estate went. So I certainly did not have the income, the 1099 income to like be buying another house. So I'm like, I got to try and get another house quickly here.
Right.
So now it's like all of a sudden I can use 75% of the income that I'm getting from this duplex to buy another house. So 6 months later, I bought my single family house, which for me personally was a little bit more comfortable.
Sure.
I didn't mind the duplex, but a two-bedroom duplex where you have, people living in the same building as you, it just wasn't working for me. We got dogs, they got dogs, things like that.
Sure.
Come into place. So, I mean, within 2 years, I got those first two properties, and then I became self-employed. So it took me a little bit longer to get my income sorted out, where I'm trying to
Sure.
write off as much as possible, but also need to be financeable. So then got another duplex this year. I got the house right next door to me, actually, and now my partner and I are under contract to purchase a 12-unit apartment building.
Oh,
So that
fantastic.
we're supposed to close
Congratulations.
in December. So it's like these things do happen quickly, and it's like once, in my opinion, if we get that 12-unit apartment building, okay, well, there's nothing stopping us from doing that
Mhm.
again. You know what I mean? So it happens quickly. Don't get hung up on today, driving the crappy car. Maybe you don't have the same material things that your friends have. That's very temporary. But those people
Oh
that
my.
spent all the money in the beginning on these frivolous things, it's not temporary for them
Oh,
because they keep putting themselves in this cycle of indebtedness, trying to keep up with the latest and greatest. It's not going to get you anywhere.
no.
Whereas all of a sudden you have, 5 properties. Well, that's pretty substantial. You can do a lot with that.
You can do a lot
You're
with
getting
that.
residual income. You can pull cash out of those properties, even though it's not advisable at 8%.
Well,
But
it
but it
depends.
could be.
It could be. What if what if your credit was bad
Yeah,
and you had
exactly.
to
It's
get
an
it and you
option
went and
at
got a
least.
big car?
Yeah.
Then guess what? It might be worth it.
Yeah, give yourself options in life. And real estate, from what my personal experience, it has given me the most options. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things that I can do now that I'm in an equitable position 5 years down the road, 6 years almost from buying those first two properties. It's like, well, that's equity there. I mean, I can do a lot with that. I can borrow
Yeah.
against it. I could sell that property. I can just continue to rent that property, gain more equity.
Mhm.
And this goes towards like a really powerful concept too when we're talking about the American dream, getting that first property or having an asset that you can borrow against, even if it's a bad idea for you to do this. And well, now you can get a HELOC and you could start a business if you want to. You get
Yeah.
you get like an idea in your head. And some people have really good ideas. The best, most
Mhm.
successful companies in the world started as a little idea. How
Yep.
many people have these great ideas that are viable? And they might be people that even could execute on these ideas, but they don't have like the 30 or 50 grand that they need to start the idea. So it's like just giving yourself the freedom, even if that business fails. I mean, at least you have the option to start it, right?
Right.
You have an asset to pull out of that isn't taking some ridiculous loan or a cash advance on a credit card or something like
Oh
that,
my.
you know?
Yeah. No. 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 And I think I remember too because we were talking a little bit
Hmm.
before the podcast here too, and the American dream is still something that people want.
Yes. Yes. We talked about this before. It's a very powerful point if I can segue back to
Yeah.
this.
Please
These
do.
bank rate surveys. So we have like a little bit of to me, there's a bridge or a gap that can be bridged here. We're talking about millennials who don't own a home that say they're willing to make a sacrifice to find more affordable housing. 82% of people between the ages of 18 and 42 in this survey, according to Bankrate's Housing Affordability Survey. That compares with 61% of non-homeowner Generation Xers and baby boomers. But 82% of people say that they're still willing to make a sacrifice to own real estate. So there is a strong desire out there. Most people, the majority, vast majority of young people still believe that owning real estate is a hallmark of financial success or the American dream or whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
29% of the people said that they would move out of state to accomplish this. 29% said they would buy a fixer-upper to accomplish this. 27% said they would downsize on living space, take on roommates, move away from family and friends. This is at least a quarter of the people surveyed agreed with all of those items there.
Yes.
So people are willing to make sacrifices. They believe that owning a home is important. The top factors in this survey here that are indicated of why people aren't buying homes are, in my opinion, mostly controllable. Again, going back to I just don't have enough income. I'm just not ready yet. Those are the driving factors.
When are you
Which
ready
I
to
think,
do anything?
yeah, exactly. So we just go back to this whole I'm gonna catch the falling knife, right? I'm gonna wait until it's opportune time to buy. Meanwhile, my friend over here down the road is Mr. Monopoly, and he's leveraged multiple properties at 8% interest in this time to acquire more real estate, and now he's got options.
Right.
So we come back to that. So my hunch, again, going back to our first topic, is that based on this information here in this survey, uh, we are not explaining these concepts, or there's not people in most young person's lives who are explaining these concepts in a way that makes sense, right? That's
Ab-
clear. It has to be that, right?
Absolutely. And we didn't even touch on down payment assistance either.
Right, and that's
You,
that's on here, right? I think, yeah, 30%. So the number four on reasons they're not buying a home is can't afford down payment. This to me is mostly like a misconception, because if it's your first home and you can get in an FHA loan at 3.5% down, or conventional maybe 3%, there are down payment assistance programs in your area that will help you bridge that gap if 3% is
yes.
unrealistic.
Yes, there are. Every single state has one.
Right.
Every single state has a state-backed down payment assistance program.
Right.
Then there's some other cool ones
Mhm.
out there too that might be a little bit more area specific.
Sure.
Where you can get forgivable grants.
Yeah, neighborhood
Yeah.
I just am applying, should be approved for a grant from Hawthorne Neighborhood Association. It's a $5,000 grant. They're just giving me money to improve my home,
Right.
putting that towards a new retaining wall. Look for these programs. Pay attention to the local government entities around you, Hennepin County, the city of Minneapolis, your neighborhood association. There's a lot of different resources out there that if you tap in, you'll find there's really good programs out there. I mean, Minneapolis is doing this lead-based paint assessment type of thing right now, where my buddy is a good friend of mine. You've met him before, Kenny. He did a
Yeah.
yeah. Kenny,
Yeah.
he bought this duplex in Northeast. I think that was maybe the one you helped him on.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So he bought this duplex in Northeast, and so he gets this letter from the city of Minneapolis that says, "Oh, there's a child in the area that claims to have been at your home in the last few years that has lead poisoning now. So we need to do a lead-based paint test on your house." That scared him pretty bad initially. But then when he figured out that there's a grant program that effectively you can apply for if there's lead-based paint in your home that is offered by the city, where they'll replace all the windows in your home at a fraction of the cost,
huge.
then it's like,
That's huge.
I mean, this is on a duplex like that. What are we talking? $20,000-$30,000 worth of windows.
Easy.
You know what I mean? Easily to do that whole place. So I can't remember exactly what he ended up at with numbers, but it was enough to make it possible for sure.
Yeah.
For most people. So pay attention to those programs. This is, again, just for people who are listening, just putting out there some ideas, some places to start on how to take control and make use of what is around you that you may not be aware of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Zach, we are a little over time.
Oh, okay. That flew by.
But that's okay. I feel like this was a really good episode. There's a lot of good chunks in here. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, if you're thinking about investing in real estate or buying your first house, Zach, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
My phone number is the best way. So I'm sure we'll get that attached on
Oh
here.
yes, that'll be attached on
Yeah,
here.
you can also find me on Facebook or Instagram. Call me anytime. I'm always open to having a discussion. And there's a lot of people in my life that reach out, and they may not ever buy a house, and I'm perfectly okay with that, because I think any information that I can give, whether you use me as an agent or someone else, it's helpful. Again, I think that there's a a really important thing happening and shift happening right now, where it's more important than ever to purchase real estate and get the resources in order to do so. So whether you do that with me or with somebody else, or do it on your own, I guess it's important to me as from a societal perspective.
Absolutely, and I'll take it even a step further than that.
Yeah.
It's not even necessarily even to invest in real estate, although that is our
Right.
chosen model.
Sure.
But just to be to get out there, to hustle, to make that money, to become financially literate,
Right.
to protect your friends, your family
Yeah.
members. I mean, it's huge.
Yep.
It's huge.
Cool.
So, guys, thank you so
Thanks,
much
man.
for watching. Please like, subscribe, do all the normal YouTube stuff. It was great having you on, Zach. Thank you
Yeah,
so much
I
for being
appreciate it.
here again. Guys, until next time, happy house hunting.